This is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I have a layout that I made for this month's Stretch the Sketch. In Stretch the Sketch, we take a 12 by 12 inch sketch and we either stretch it to a larger format or we shrink it to a smaller one. For this month's sketch, which was created by Solin Studio, I looked at it and I immediately thought this is the perfect sketch to stretch. So I decided that I was going to make a 2-page layout. I love the way the sketch had strips of paper in different widths, and I thought that I was just very simply going to take that concept and spread it all the way across the 2 pages. I started off with 2 matching wood green pattern papers, and I got these papers from a Recollections pad called Whiskey Barrel. It was in my stash. I'm not sure how old it is, but it had quite a few different wood grain papers in it, and I thought that they would be the perfect background for this layout. I'm also using an Echo Park collection called Hello Winter. You can also see on the layout that I have 2 red squares, one for each side of the 2-page spread, and I'm attaching the strips of paper down to the red squares first, just in case I'm unhappy with the way that I attach the papers down. It's a lot easier for me to peel them up from a scrap piece of paper than it is for me to peel them up from the background paper. I might rip it, or I might totally change my mind about what I'm doing, and I want to make sure that I don't make a mess of the background paper. Off camera, I use a T-square to make sure that all those strips of paper were straight. For me, it's a lot harder than it looks to get all those pieces of paper perfectly lined up and layered on top of each other, so I did use a T-square off camera and made sure that they were all perfectly straight, or if not perfectly straight, pretty straight. I wanted both sides of the layout to match as far as the strips of paper, so I took the matching strip of paper, I turned it over, and I layered it on top of its mate on the left-hand side. And then I took the red square of paper, I put adhesive on it, and that helps to attach all those strips of paper together. And then when I flipped it over, I trimmed it down, and then the 2 sides of the layout matched. And I think that this was probably easier than trying to measure everything. I was actually a little bit surprised that it worked out so easily. Now I have my background all set, and now I have my photos ready to go. I've already cut them to size, and I've mounted them on some white cardstock. I have 3 different size photos, and I went along with the sketch. I have the largest photo first, and then I alternated between a rather small photo and a medium-sized photo. Just like in the sketch, I'm layering the larger photos on top of the smaller photos. I attach all the photos down with some ATG adhesive. Once I have that done, it's time to start embellishing. I start by using an EK Success border punch in a snowflake pattern, and I punch out 4 12-inch strips of this snowflake design. Before I attached that border down, I decided to remove the white border from the photo that's on the left-hand side of the right-hand page. The vertical border was visible on the left-hand side, and that didn't go along with the rest of the small photos where the edges or the white border is covered up by the white border of the larger photo next to it. So I trimmed that off so that it wouldn't look different from the rest of the photos. And now I'm using some adhesive and I'm attaching the snowflake borders down to the page. I'm putting them on top of the top strip and below the bottom strip. There was a sticker sheet for the Hello Winter collection that I used for a lot of the embellishing. There were some long stickers on the sticker sheet. One of them was a white and blue diagonal stripe. I really like that one. I cut it into thin strips, but I could not get the backing off, and it ended up ripping with me trying to get the backing off. So I instead chose a plaid sticker, and I cut that into thin strips, and you can see that I've put that right along the border between the snowflakes and the pattern paper. I'm picking a few stickers to add to the layout. There was one that says walking in a winter wonderland, and so I mounted that on some of the blue dotted pattern paper, and then I added a pine tree sticker right on top of it. The sticker that I'm working with right now is a very large banner. There was a center section of the banner that had a polar bear on it, and I didn't want to cut the polar bear's face in half, so I ended up just removing that whole section and having 8 little sections instead of 9, and then I saved the banner with the bear's face on it, and I'm going to use that on another part of the layout. Something that I love to do is add photo corners to my photos, and in this layout I'm just adding them to the 3 larger photos. I use an EK Success scalloped photo corner punch, and I punch some photo corners that are a wood grain from one of the pattern papers, and then I attach those down to those 3 photos. Now I was able to salvage a little bit of that blue and white diagonal strip of sticker that I wasn't able to get the backing off of to use underneath the sentiment "Walking in a Winter Wonderland." And then I started working on my title. And even though the sentiment says "Walking in a Winter Wonderland," I decided to call the layout "Winter Wonderland" anyway. I'm using some sparkly white thickers that I had in my stash, and I started from the end of the word winter so that I could space the word winter correctly from the edge of the paper. And then for the word Wonderland, I started with the W and worked my way to the right. I placed the banner with the bear on it on the left-hand side of the layout, and then I added a sentiment that says "Wintertime Fun" underneath that biggest photo. I used a dog with a scarf on it to start a cluster in the upper left-hand corner of the page, and that's to help balance out the cluster that's on the lower right-hand side of the page. I wanted to add some rhinestones to the page, add a little bit of bling, and I always love the way rhinestones look on pages that are snow themed. I put rhinestones between each section of that large banner. I put a little one on the sentiment that says "Walking in a Winter Wonderland," and I also put some rhinestones on each of the photo corners on the page. I also added them to that little flag that has the polar bear on it, but I go back later and I take those off and I add a different kind of jewel. I added a cute little owl to the cluster on the bottom, and then I added some sentiments on top of 2 of the smaller photos. I do go in later on and rearrange some of that. I didn't like the way there were 2 sentiments that were the same. For a minute, I tried that polar bear banner up in the top cluster, but I changed my mind about that, especially when I realized that by picking up that banner, I ripped the pattern paper. So I ended up putting it back, and then I built up that cluster on the upper left-hand side in a different way. I also added a number of rhinestone snowflakes to the page, and right now I'm just placing them down. I'm not really sure where I want to put them, so I kind of scatter them around the page, and they do end up moving around a little bit. I wanted to add some more bling. I wanted it to be a little more subtle than the rhinestones, though. I didn't want to have rhinestones everywhere on the page, so I added some very, very tiny white jewels to all of the snowflakes that are on those border strips. I used Glossy Accents to attach down a rhinestone snowflake on either side of the banner. I think that the Glossy Accents is really good for things like pearls and rhinestones and jewels. I think it tends to hold things to the page better than some of the other glues that I use. I'm adding one of those very tiny white jewels to each of the snowflakes. I really thought that that would add a nice little touch to each of the snowflakes. So I glued those little jewels in the center of all the snowflakes on the page. I wasn't really happy with anything that I had put to the left of the word winter. Winter is so much shorter than Wonderland. I felt like I had to have something else up there, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to put to the left of that word. I ended up using some stickers that looked like wind gusts or swirls, and I think that ended up being a good way to fill in that area. I'm very sorry about the framing of the video here. I'm not sure why it's like this, but you can see everything that I'm doing, and eventually it does go back to the correct framing. I wanted there to be a number of jewels on those wind gusts, so I added some of those small white jewels, and then I also added a number of snowflakes with the small jewels attached to them. I removed one of the sentiments from the left-hand side of the layout and I replaced it with a sticker of a snowflake. I continue adding those small jewels to the centers of the rhinestone snowflakes, and then I started attaching the letters down to the layout. Some stickers have a good amount of stick to them. These particular ones definitely needed some extra adhesive, so I'm going one by one and attaching the letters down to the page. And it's not the most unique title, but I thought that it went really well with these photos. I really loved the way they were so blue and the snow was so reflective in these pictures. I add a few more of those jewels to those wind gusts or swirls. And these very tiny jewels that I'm using, and I think I got these jewels in the dollar store. They are in strips, so I'm using my scissors as I go along to cut the strips into individual pieces so that I can apply each jewel individually. I really like these little jewels. They're very tiny, but they're very sparkly. I wish I knew where to get more, but I don't recall which dollar store I purchased them at. Although, who knows if they would still have them because I feel like a lot of the stores near me are very low on merchandise these days. The sentiment that says snow much fun, that just doesn't look right to me. So I moved it around and then I decided that I was going to put another snowflake on the right hand side of the layout and then move that sentiment back to where it was. And then of course I have to have all of the elements on the page matching. So I added some of those very tiny jewels to the center and to the outside of that sticker. And then I do the same thing to the other snowflake sticker that's on the left. The jewels are the very last touch that I add to the layout. And in a moment, you will see some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. I really appreciate it. I really hope that you enjoyed watching it. Please take a look in the description box. You'll find links to all of the other scrapbookers who are taking part in Stretch the Sketch this month. I think it's such a fun hop and I always look forward to creating for it. It truly is a challenge for me and I really love that about it. I hope everybody has a fantastic day and I hope I will see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.